So, Mr. Koo, let me quickly ask you, of course, Chancellor Angela Merkel being the first one to command everybody in Europe to watch austerity, because Germany is, of course, trying to chip into the petty cash to help the European economies. Is she wrong?
Yes.
What should she say then?
Except the case of Greece, almost all the other countries have more savings, domestic savings, than the size of the budget deficit. But no one pays attention to the size of the private sector savings. Everybody just pays attention to the budget deficit, which is often more than 3% of GDP, and they make all the fusses, including Mrs. Merkel. But when you look at the size of the private sector deficit, there's no reason to worry that financing of these countries will run into problems, except that in the Eurozone, there's another problem, and that is that this is more than 2 minutes.
It is, but it's so interesting, Mr. Koo. Well, I guess the problem is with the Maastricht Treaty that maybe the rules are just too tough and unrealistic.
No. In US, Japan, or UK, all the countries outside the Eurozone, if the country has what I call balance sheet problems, balance sheet recessions, where private sector is minimizing debt instead of maximizing profits, the investors, the fund managers, they cannot lend to the private sector because private sector is not borrowing money. And many fund managers cannot take too much foreign exchange risk. So if you have already taken enough foreign exchange risk, the only other borrower is your own government, because that's the only borrower left. So you end up lending to the government, bond yields come down. But in the Eurozone, each fund manager in any of these countries have 17 government bonds market to choose from, because they're all under the same currency. And so if you don't like your own government bond, you just buy German government bond, which has happened in Italy, in Spain, Portugal. All the savings that are generated are not going to their own government bond market. It went to somewhere else. And as a result, interest rates went up instead of down. In Japan, it went down. In Sweden, it went down. UK, United States, all went down. But in the Eurozone, some countries had a very sharp increase. And if you see the increase in the bonds, then of course they say, we cannot run fiscal stimulus. So in order to counter this issue, I've been suggesting that Eurozone fund managers should be put under a different risk weights. If you hold your own government bond, risk weight is still zero, like right now. But if you hold someone else's government bond, the risk weight will be higher, so that there will be more incentive for Italians to hold Italian government bonds, for Spanish to hold Spanish government bonds. And if that risk weight is in place, interest rates will come down, and then the government can run larger fiscal stimulus, and all the problems will be resolved.